Did you know the Bible commands us over 30 times to care for the stranger and the foreigner? That's more than it talks about prayer or fasting. Yet how do these ancient commands align with modern challenges like immigration raids, border policies, and deportations? Welcome back to The Faithful Scribe, where we uncover the hidden truths of Scripture and connect them to today's world. Today, we're diving into a topic that stirs emotions and sparks debates: immigration, justice, and faith. Before we jump in, let me invite you to subscribe to our channel. If you're passionate about deepening your understanding of Scripture and seeing its relevance in our modern world, this is the place for you. Join our growing community by clicking that subscribe button and turning on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's take a journey through the pages of the Bible to discover what it truly means to love the stranger, uphold justice, and reflect God's heart in a world grappling with division and fear. The Bible doesn't shy away from addressing the treatment of foreigners. In fact, one of the clearest commands is found in Leviticus 19:33-34. When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Why did God stress this command so much? To fully understand, we need to step into the shoes of the ancient Israelites. They were once a displaced people, fleeing famine, and later enduring 400 years of oppression in Egypt. Their story wasn't just about physical deliverance. It was meant to shape their character as a nation called to embody kindness, justice, and love for others, especially the vulnerable. Here's a fascinating detail. The Hebrew word for stranger in this passage, ger, refers to someone who has chosen to dwell among you long term. It's not about fleeting hospitality. It's about fully welcoming and integrating them into the community. This distinction adds weight to God's command. It's not just about being polite. It's about radically reorienting our lives to care for those who come to us seeking refuge. In today's world, we might ask ourselves, are we living out this biblical mandate? Do our policies and actions reflect God's heart for the vulnerable? When we see news of immigration raids tearing families apart, or people living in fear of deportation, how do we reconcile this with the command to love the stranger as ourselves? The ancient Israelites were called to remember their own experiences of displacement and oppression. In the same way, we are called to let empathy shape our actions. What would it look like if our communities embraced this principle in how we treat refugees and immigrants today? Throughout the Bible, justice and mercy are presented as two sides of the same coin. One of the most quoted verses on this balance is Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. This concept becomes especially relevant in today's immigration debates. Advocates of strict immigration enforcement often cite Romans 13:1, which says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established." While this verse emphasizes the importance of law and order, how do we reconcile it with Jesus' radical command to love our neighbor and care for the least among us? Consider the story of Ruth. As a Moabite, Ruth was an immigrant who, by Israelite law, should have been excluded from the community. Yet she was welcomed, and through her faithfulness and God's providence, she became the great-grandmother of King David. Her story is a powerful reminder that God's justice is always intertwined with His mercy. This raises important questions about modern immigration policies. Are they lawful but lacking in compassion? Are we missing the biblical call to show mercy to the vulnerable? As followers of Christ, our role is to live out this balance, not leaning so heavily on rules that we forget love, nor ignoring justice in favor of sentimentality. True faith calls us to hold both together, just as God does. Migration is a recurring theme throughout Scripture. From the patriarchs to the prophets, God often used displacement to fulfill his purposes. Abraham left his homeland to follow God's call. Joseph brought his family to Egypt during a famine. Even Mary, Joseph, and Jesus fled to Egypt to escape Herod's persecution. But there's something profound we often overlook. Jesus himself was an immigrant. As a child, he lived as a refugee in Egypt, relying on the kindness of others in a foreign land. This adds a new dimension to his teachings on loving the stranger. When Jesus said, "I was a stranger, and you welcomed me," Matthew 25:35, he spoke from experience. Now imagine this. When we see images of families being separated at the border or hear stories of individuals detained while seeking a better life, how does this align with our faith? Are we truly seeing Jesus in these migrants as he calls us to? And what about today's displaced populations, those fleeing war, persecution, or poverty? As the global refugee crisis grows, the stories of Scripture compel us to ask, how can we reflect God's love and provision to those who are suffering? Recent headlines reveal the harsh realities of immigration enforcement. Families have been separated, asylum seekers detained without due process, and many forced to live in fear. As Christians, how should we respond? Proverbs 31:8-9 offers a clear directive. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. This verse challenges us to look beyond partisan politics and focus on biblical principles of justice and mercy. But what does that look like in practice? It doesn't mean ignoring the law. As citizens, we're called to respect governance. However, as followers of Christ, we must also challenge laws that fail to uphold human dignity. When policies harm families and disregard the image of God in every person, it's our responsibility to advocate for change. It's worth noting that immigration policies vary widely around the world, yet the ethical questions remain consistent. Whether in the US, Europe, or elsewhere, Christians have a unique opportunity to bring a kingdom perspective to the conversation. So, what can we do? How can we, as Christians, navigate the complexities of immigration with faith and action? 1. Pray. Lift up immigrants, government leaders, and organizations working to bring justice and compassion to this issue. 2. Advocate. Support policies that prioritize family unity, fairness, and human dignity. 3. Act. Volunteer with local organizations assisting immigrants or donate to causes providing legal aid and resources. 4. Educate. Use platforms like this one to share the biblical perspective on welcoming the stranger. One inspiring example of faith in action is the sanctuary movement, where churches provide shelter for undocumented immigrants facing deportation. This mirrors the biblical concept of cities of refuge, where those accused of crimes could find safety while awaiting a fair trial. In the face of these challenges, we're called to embody the love of Christ, to be his hands and feet in a world that desperately needs both justice and mercy. The issue of immigration isn't just political, it's deeply spiritual. It challenges us to live out our faith in ways that reflect God's heart for the vulnerable, the displaced, and the marginalized. As we navigate these complexities, let's remember Jesus' words. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. John 13:35. Loving one another includes the stranger, the immigrant, and the refugee. Thank you for joining us today on The Faithful Scribe. If this message resonated with you, please like, comment, and share this video. And don't forget to subscribe for more biblical insights that inspire action. Until next time, May your faith lead you to justice, and may your love reflect Christ.